Continuing from last night, if for those of you who can recall, last night Pastor Dexter talked about, it took the Lord 40 years to help us to get to this point to understand family. Okay, so I'm going to continue this morning along the same theme, and as strange as this is going to sound, but I think the whole idea of the revelation of the family is actually a pretty new revelation to the body of Christ. Okay, and when I get into it, you'll see what I mean. I would say it's new for our current generation, but it's been old and long for generations prior to the Dark Ages. Okay, I think the early church understood it. I think definitely in biblical times, the families in the Old Testament understood it really well. I think we lost a lot of that revelation during the Dark Ages. I think the Lord has been restoring different levels of revelation. I think that the whole idea of family hasn't been fully restored yet, but I think eventually we'll get there. Okay, so so let's talk about why is the Lord wanting us to really understand the concept of family. Okay, and for those of you who heard me speak in the past, and in this particular session, I'm going to use the term multi-generational families. But for those of you who heard me speak in the past, I use the word dynasty, okay? It's going to be synonymous to dynasty, but I'm going to call it multi-generational family to flow more within the context of this camp and what the Lord is revealing. Okay? And sometimes even though theologically I believe that the word dynasty is a more accurate term for it, but I know that in the society we live in, that has some very serious negative connotations that a lot of Christians just have a problem getting over that. So for the sake of putting everyone in a more comfortable place, I'm just going to use the word multi-generational families. Is that okay with you? Yeah. Okay. Why do we need to understand multi-generational families? First of all, is what is a multi-generational family? Okay, it's when a family lasts for multiple generations. Okay, it's as simple as that. Okay, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob is considered one family. If you all can accept that premise, okay, then that would be considered a multi-generational family. You have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, 3 generations. Okay, so that makes it very different than a family that only lasts 1 generation. Okay. So when we talk about multi-generational family, the question is that why is that so important? Well, for whatever reason that is probably beyond my understanding, and you're gonna find this during my session, is that I don't have all the answers, and you're gonna have to be okay with that. Okay? Okay, because I can either bluff you and pretend to make something up, or tell you the truth and say I do not know. Okay? And when we talk about something that's so new and revelation that's so new, we got to be okay and comfortable with the idea that we do not know everything. Okay? So the first thing is, why a multi-generational family so important? Because when I look through the Bible, every major assignment that the Lord releases in the world was given to a multi-generational family. Do you realize that? Okay, let's talk about the very first assignment that He's given to mankind. Okay, before mankind sinned, the Lord actually gave us an assignment. Okay, and that clearly wasn't to preach the gospel, because there was no sin. Who do you preach to? Who do you get saved? Okay, so the first assignment that the Lord ever gave to mankind, I'm not going to talk so much about the assignment, but I'm going to talk about who He gave it to. Okay, you can see in Genesis 1. Okay. And, Adam and Eve were in the garden, and the Lord said to them, be fruitful and multiply, have dominion over all mankind. That was really the first assignment, okay? And for those of you, I've spoken about the first assignment in the past. I'm not going to reiterate that. But what I want you to pay attention to is the question really is, who was the assignment given to? Was it given to Adam? And on the surface, it kind of sounded like it was given to Adam. But if you look at the context and you look at the words that were actually spoken, and he said to them, it was in a plural form. Who is the them? It was a family unit. Okay? In fact, it wasn't a complete family unit. It was just Adam and Eve. Okay? And the Lord told them, the first thing you do is to complete the family. Okay? How do you complete the family? He said, you need to multiply. Okay? You're not a family. You're just a couple until you have kids. Do you realize that? Okay, so he said the first thing you do is to complete the family unit and say to them, then you do the assignment of having dominion and ruling over the earth. Okay? Now, I'll take you fast forward to the time of Abraham. Same thing we see happening. When the Lord wanted to create the prototype family on the earth and say, you will be a blessing to many nations, right? Do you remember that assignment that was given to Abraham? Question was that, who did the Lord give it to? He gave it to a family unit. He told Abraham, first thing I'm going to do is to give you a son. I need to complete the couple of Abraham and Sarah and turn it into a family unit. Okay? You look at one of the biggest catastrophe that ever happened to mankind, the Great Flood. Who was the assignment given to? A family unit. Now when I say family units, I don't want, for those of you who have chosen to live your life to be single the rest of your life, to feel left out, okay? There are spiritual families as well. Okay, they are not all biological families. Okay, Elijah, for example, Elisha's school of prophets, that was a spiritual family. When the Lord gave the assignment to Elijah, he did not give it specifically to a person because, as you know, Elijah never carried it out. You know? Elijah only carried, one out of all the assignments that the Lord gave him? And the Lord gave him, 3? He only did 1. And his excuse was what? Oh, a chariot of fire came and took me up. I couldn't do the rest. What kind of lame excuse is that? It's like saying the dog ate my homework. But, you see, he never carried out his assignment. Okay? However, if you look at it in the context of a family unit, he did carry out the assignment because Elisha and the school of prophet carried out the remaining 2 assignments that was given to him. So if you look at it from the multi-generational perspective, the Lord do give assignments to family units whereby it is carried out over multiple generations. Okay, and it doesn't have to be a biological family. It can be a spiritual family. Okay, so that's where things become clearer and unclear at the same time. Because the question then is, what is a family? Right? And as simple as this sounds, I've been pondering over this issue for at least a year and a half. What is a family? Okay, it seems to be a really complicated issue. So where do you go to look for answers? The first place you go, you look into the Bible. Okay? You look into the Bible and you said, okay, Abraham was his family. Okay? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. They got the 12 tribes. At what point do the family end? And are they all considered one family? Or do they then, at what point do they then become multiple families? Okay? And then you look at how does God refer to the assignments that he gave. When he gave assignment to David, he called it the house of David. The house of David was in reference to the family of David. So then go, wait a minute, why does he call it house of David and not call it house of Abraham? Because isn't David part of Abraham's family, or does it now become a separate family? So it becomes quite complicated. Okay? So this is my best understanding on the levels of family. Okay? So on the first one I call the people group. Okay? That is the children of Israel. They're considered one family on a pretty large scale of like, at the time when they were living in Egypt, I think there were like a few 100,000 of them. Okay? Now, then the next level below the people category is the tribes. Okay? Each tribe is still considered a family. Right? The tribe of Judah, the tribe of Issachar, the tribe of Jebulun. And then within each tribe, the Lord do make references to multi-generational families within them, and He calls them the house. Okay? The house of David, the house of Jacob, the house of Obadiah. Okay? The Lord referenced them as the house. And when we reference the house, it doesn't
mean one generation.
It can be multiple generations. Okay? Like the house of David. Even when Jesus came back, He referenced Himself to be part of the family of the house of David. Okay? So we see a multi-generational definition even for houses. Now this becomes really interesting, because then the question is, when the Lord leads us as a movement, as Latter Rain, and says that, it took us 40 years to learn that the Lord is trying to teach us family, the question is, on what level of family are we? Are we considered a people group category? Are we considered a tribe? Or are we considered a house? Because the implications are different. Right? So that's something as a movement, we need to seek the Lord, and we need to find out. If we are a family, what level of family are we? Okay? And the way they behave is different. Okay? I don't think we are people category. Okay? I think we are either tribe or houses. That I'm not sure. Tribes have a tendency to be given a similar gift. Okay? Tribe of Issachar. The tribe of Issachar was the only family that could tell the time, because they had watches. No, I'm kidding. But I'm not kidding about part that they could tell the time. The Bible do say they're the only tribe that could tell the time. I was kidding because watches wasn't invented then. They were using the sundial. No, I'm just kidding about that too. Okay, now what I mean by they could tell the time, I mean they're the only ones that knew what the Lord wanted to do in that season. Okay, they could tell the time of the Lord. Okay, the tribe of Zebulun was gifted in business. The tribe of Judah was gifted to rule over nations. And very interestingly, I sometimes think that there's a category in which between people and tribes, because there's a tendency for God to even group tribes together. When you look at how the tabernacle was laid out, the tribe of Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun was always grouped together. Okay? Now, why does the grouping matters? Because when you talk about family, okay, after you define what a family is, then the next question really is, how do you get families to stay together? Right? No point being called a family if you never met the person in your life and never will do ever again. To whatever definition of family is, you will not consider the person family. Agreed? Okay. Now, why are we looking at the location of the tribes around the tabernacle matters? Because it tells you the level and strength of the relationships within the family and between the family. When you have to share bathroom with someone, okay, that takes you a whole different level, okay? And when you look at the way the tribes are laid out, and they were moving through the desert, and there are no toilets, okay? It takes it to a different level of relationship, okay? Where you actually live that kind of close quarters with someone. So the tribe of Zebulun, Judah, and Issachar was always together. That means if someone went to the bathroom, someone in the tribe is going to smell it. But you get the idea, okay? Now, why that's important? Because then when we talk about tribes, there could be a category between tribes and people that group certain tribes together. And if there isn't such a category, then the question really is, even if we consider ourselves a tribe, does it mean that we have to be in alliance with some other tribes to fulfill our destiny? So that is something that I think as a movement we need to seek the Lord. But on a more personal level, take it down a notch, you have houses. So within each tribe, you have houses. Okay? And those houses are multi-generational. Okay? So when I started getting this revelation, I started beginning to look into it and say that, first of all, have this ever been achieved? Are there families in the world that have achieved multi-generational influence and how powerful or how impactful are those influences. Okay? And then you look at it and then you realize that, wow, there really are some very significant families out there with multi-generational influence. For example, I'll give you a few examples. In the US, some very prominent ones is like the Bush family. The Bush family is a multi-generational family that have been raising presidents after presidents. Okay, if they're not presidents, they are, governors of state or someone really significant. Multi-generations. The Kennedys is another example. Okay, of raising up, national leaders in America. And then today you look into Europe, you see the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are an interesting one because they're Jewish, okay? And right now they're probably the most influential family in the circles. There's literally very few things that go on in banking without their influence. They also happen to be one of the most secretive family in the world. Okay, but they have somehow managed to keep the family together over multiple generations. Okay, and I'm going to talk more about how families stay together. So not only we have to figure out what a family is, we got to figure out how do families stay together. And that happens to be actually an easier problem than the first problem of what is a family. Because I'll tell you why. When I was trying to figure this out, and I go like, okay, let's talk about it in some real practical terms. If I were to start a house, if the Lord assigned me to start a house, okay, and I were to have multi-generations in my house, okay, who is part of my family and who's not part of my family 1, 2, 3 generations down? It may sound simple, but it's very complicated. I'll tell you why. Because when you start talking about 2, 3, 4 generations down, you got to consider the possibility of a lot of other eventualities. For example, marriages, okay, no problem. Do the spouse become part of the family or they're not part of the family? Okay? How about if someone divorces one spouse and remarries, do the ex-spouse still get to be the part of the family or they get kicked out? Okay, let's make it even more complicated. What if the biological member of the family was the one that cheated on the wife, okay? And it's a divorce based on fault. Do you kick the innocent wife out now because she's divorced? Or do you kick your own biological member out because he cheated on the wife? Okay? So that's one level. Then it gets more complicated. What about adoption? What about marrying someone with biological kids? Do the biological kids then be part of the family as well? What if they're biological adult kids? Okay, then do they get to be part of family? Can someone leave a family? Okay, what does it take to leave a family? What if they change faith? What if they go insane? So you start to ponder on all these eventualities, okay? And because you need that to define what is a family. Right? And I'll take it to a more practical level. If we want to consider Lateran to be a family, we got some very serious contemplation to do and seeking the Lord. Because the question is, who is part of the Lateran family? What do you need to do to be part of the Lateran family? Do you need to attend church every Sunday? Or do you not need to attend church every Sunday? Can you go to another church and still be part of the Lateran family? Or what if you leave the country? Do you then not become part of the Lateran family? Or then can you attend another church in another country and still be part of the Lateran family? Then what about those who don't leave the country? Can they attend another church and still be part of the Lateran family? You see, I'm going to ask all these questions that I know you're thinking, but no one dares to ask. But this is something that we got to seek the Lord. If the Lord seriously wants us to be a family, the first and foremost, we got to figure out who is in the family, right? That is something we got to seek the Lord. We got to find out. Because only when we can figure out what is a family and who is in the family, then can we pursue the idea of maybe families, for us to be a family, we need to function as a family. And the first function of family is a relational function. Families are related. They are in relationship. Right? Okay. If that being the case, then the question is, what has the Lord done with his so-called prototype family, the children of Israel, to create a relational driver to keep them together? Because by the time of Moses, we're talking about a few 100,000 of them in the family. That's a lot of members to be in a family. Okay? And if you are the grandpa, you're required to remember the names of all the great-great-grandkids. That is a lot of names. Okay? And the question that, are they all required to live together? Or can they live further apart? Can they leave the country? If you let 10% leave the country, that's 10,000 of them. Okay? Do they then not be part of the family? How do they then remain part of the family? So then you start to look at the children of Israel as God's prototype family and ask the Lord, Lord, what have you done to keep them relationally together? And then if you look at the children of Israel today, you realize that interestingly, a lot of them are still very linked up together. In fact, that's how they trade, that's how they do commerce, and that's why they can run one of the most powerful banking networks in the world. It's through their family network. That's why the Rothschild has one of the largest banking influence in the world. Because the Rothschild were Jews and they were part of this family network. Okay? Then you look in the scripture and then you see, and whenever I teach about this, I want you all to have very clear understanding, okay? I'm not trying to turn any of you Jewish, okay? Let's be clear. But I do talk a lot about the Jewish culture, not to make you all Jewish, but because the Lord used them as the prototype family, and so there are a lot of things we can learn from their culture and the way they do things, because that was the way God kind of designed their culture. Okay, that doesn't mean that you need to get circumcised tomorrow and start eating kosher food. Okay, but it does mean that we need to have an appreciation for their culture different than what we would for any other culture. Does that make sense? Okay, so when I talk about the time of the Lord, the seasons of the Lord, and I talk about the Hebraic calendar, and the reason why I use it is because that was the system the Lord designed for them. It's not that I want to be Jewish, it's just that it just so happened that God chose them to be the prototype, right? Okay, so again, when I talk about relational drivers, I'm not asking you all to turn Jewish tomorrow and start adopting Jewish traditions. I'm asking you all to appreciate what the Lord did in their culture to create a family that lasts over multiple generations. Okay? So one of the things that the Lord did was that he instituted 3 feasts. Do you remember that? In Exodus 23 verse 14, 3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me this year. Thou shalt keep the feast of the unleavened bread, okay? And the feast of the harvest, the first fruits of labors, thou sow in the field, and the feast of ingathering, which is at the end of the year. And thou hast gathered in thy laborers out of the field 3 times in the year. All thy males shall appear before the Lord God. Okay? This is more than just a religious ritual. This was intended to be a relational driver that will allow them to maintain a relationship in the family over multiple generations, especially when the family grows to hundreds of thousands of people. Okay, because in practical sense, I tell you what happens now. Doesn't matter where you are, 3 times a year, you have to balik kampung. Does that make sense? I mean, the Chinese, what we do, Chinese New Year once a year, and then already we're complaining, right? These guys have to do 3 times a year. Can you imagine the travel costs? But that allowed them 3 times a year to be in relationship. I was reading about another family, and fairly wealthy family, and they wanted to create a multi-generational family culture, right? But they were not as powerful or influential as the Bush, the Kennedys, or the Rockefellers, or the Rothschild. But they had some money, okay? So what the parents did was that the parents had kids and grandkids and all that. They took all their wealth, okay? They took all their money, sold all their properties, everything, took everything that they had, and they bought the largest vacation home they can find, okay? That is on a giant piece of land in some beach somewhere in the outskirts, okay? And then they wrote a will, and they put the property in a trust whereby none of the kids can ever sell it forever. So now all of a sudden when the parents pass away, they have this giant vacation property that no one can sell and divide the inheritance. All they can do is to use that vacation property. Okay? And then you look at the family 3 generations down, and you realize they're still intact and together. And you ask yourself, why? Because apparently that's the only free vacation they could go to. So every family goes there for all their family vacation. So every summer, all of them will go there. And because it's such a big property, it can fit all of them. So every summer, the entire family from all over the US goes there for vacation. I'm not saying that you should do that, okay? I'm just telling you what others have done, okay? So that's one family, okay? Again, the issue of who is a family member, okay? The Rothschild has a very interesting concept. They said only the males can be part of the family. Daughters cannot be part of the family. Okay? Now, before all the guys say woohoo and amen to that, the guys have some restriction on them. To be part of the family as a guy, you can only marry from a list of families. Forever. Every generation down cannot marry outside this list of families. Now they have a little bit of problem because apparently it's gotten to a place where everyone's related already. So trying to find someone in that list that's not related to you is becoming harder and harder. But that was how they chose to define family. Okay? And before you laugh at them, also remember they are one of the most powerful families right now today. So somehow, no matter how quirky or weird that thing is, it's working. and sons who marry outside that list get kicked out of the family. Okay? So that's one family. Another family, everything goes to the eldest son. Okay, and nothing gets divided. Okay, from generation to generation, everything just goes only to the eldest son. Okay, and I'll tell you what the family is, you will recognize it. It's Fiat. Anyone has a Fiat car? Do you know how good that car is? So the problem comes when certain generations, the son not very good. And then the cars become really bad. So you can see the quality of the car based on which generation son took over. The Ford is another family. Now there are about 200 of them. Okay? And Ford Motors, anyone has a Ford car? Up to now is still controlled by the family. Okay? And the family has still remained intact. Does it mean that everyone in the family is part of the company? No. Now it's at the point where they have 200 of them. Out of 200, I think only 4 of them are actually involved in the company. But all 200 of them are part of the governance of the company. Okay? So which brings us to another question. What brings a family together that causes them to stay together? Okay? I gave you an example of a vacation home. That was an asset. A common asset causes a family to stay together. Okay? I give you an example of Ford. Again, it was a common asset of owning the same company that caused them to stay together. Okay? So if you're talking in terms of context of latter rain, when we start to define who is part of the family, the question we should also ask is, what causes latter rain members to be part of the latter rain family? Is it a common belief? Is it a common mission? Is it a common what? Is it a common assignment? We got to seek the Lord and ask them, because clearly it's not a common asset. So that one kind of goes out the window. We're talking about who is part of family. So one interesting one is the Toyota. Do you know that Toyota is actually a family-owned business as well? Okay, multi-generational family. They had a very different policy compared to the Rothschild. Their family was that anyone who gets married, their spouse immediately becomes part of the family. Okay? Which kind of interesting because, there was one particular time in their history where that actually saved the entire company. Because all the kids were horrible in business and really bad in cars. And it so happened that one of the daughter ended up marrying a really smart guy. And because she married him and he became part of the family, he turned the entire business around and made them the success it is today. So that's another family that you could reflect on and look at their interesting rules. What was also interesting is that families who last over multiple generations, what I also noticed is that a lot of them intentionally get their kids to live in different countries. And a lot of them attribute that ability for their success as a family. I'll give you one specific example, Rothschild. The dad made all his sons live in a different country. They were not allowed to live in the same country. And in the early days, that allowed it to do a few things. First of all, it allowed it immediately to become an international network. Okay. Secondly, that allowed the dad to know about things that happen in different countries that no one else in the business knew about. Thirdly, that allowed the family to survive wars. When you have war in a country and the entire economy collapses in one country, when you have a family that stretches across multiple countries, the chances of survival is a lot higher. There's a French family who did that as well, and during World War II, the entire family wealth was destroyed during the war, save for the fact that they had one child living in America. And that allowed it to continue as a family. So, but that adds another layer of complication and problems, right? When you have families with children and each of them living in a different country, that makes it really difficult to remain intact as a family, okay? But I'm just putting it out there for you all to contemplate and consider. But for families who want to survive over multiple world wars, yeah, you need to have family that stretches across multiple countries. Otherwise, you'll not survive political upheavals, wars, or catastrophes as a family. And the reason why I say that also is because I know that many of you from East Malaysia here today, right? And if you all remember, I've been speaking in this conference once a year, and 2 or 3 conferences back, I've already said that we need to go to a place, where we have more East Malaysians in this conference than we have non-East Malaysians, right? You remember me saying that? Because of the way things are changing. Now, the biggest struggle with you guys from East Malaysia is going to be that you're going to have to raise families that span across geographical regions for God to use you in an influential way. And your culture and your tradition is going to really struggle with that. You know, East Malaysians like to remain together, right? Moving from Miri to Kuching already is like at the ends of the earth. But if you want the Lord to use you in a very effective way, and for you to raise up families, you got to really embrace the idea that the Lord is going to have you raise family that span across large geographical distance. How long does the Lord wants families to last? Does it have an expiration date? I'm not sure I have all the answers, but I know when it came to the house of David, in 2 Samuel 7 verse 16, Nathan was speaking about the house of David. When I say about the house of David, you got to remember he's talking about the family of David, okay? Not talking about physical building, okay? Otherwise, it would be an engineering nightmare. Because the prophetic word said, thy house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee, and thy throne shall be established forever. According to all these words, according to all these visions, so did Nathan speak unto David. 2 Samuel 7:16. Okay? So I have to believe that it refers to the multi-generational family of David and not the physical house. Right? Otherwise, that would be some incredible engineering. How do you build a house that lasts forever? The Chinese have a saying, wealth does not pass 3 generations. Have you all heard this saying? From rice paddy to rice paddy in 3 generations. Heard that before? From rags to riches and back again in 3 generations. And when you raise multi-generational families, that is really the first hurdle, one of the biggest hurdle you have to overcome. It's how does your family actually survive more than 3 generations? Most families do not survive more than 3 generations as a family unit. I mean, their descendants survive, people survive, but as a single unit, still in relationship, almost none of them survive more than 3 generations. Proverbs 13 verse 22. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. Okay? Again, we see, you cannot look at this outside what God does in a systematic way across the Bible. Alright, if you look at this, you're going to interpret this and say basically that unless you leave a lot of money, you have failed. Okay, that's not the point. The point is, okay, a good man leaves an inheritance for a multi-generational family. You got to look at it in that context because the multi-generational family is carrying out either an assignment from the Lord or something that the family have been tasked from the Lord to do. You got to look at it in the context of Abraham having the assignment from the Lord. You got to look at it in terms of Adam receiving that commission from the Lord. You got to look at it in terms of Noah being asked to build the ark of the Lord. Okay? You got to look at it in those contexts. And if you want biblical basis for that belief, all you have to do to look at Abraham, and then so that you look down the scriptures at Moses when he was crossing the desert, and the Lord told to him, I'm going to give you the ability to create wealth so that, you can fulfill my covenant. Okay? So it wasn't just the ability to create wealth out of context and like, I'm just going to give you the power to get wealthy. He says, so that you can fulfill my covenant. What covenant was he talking to? He was talking about the Abrahamic covenant, okay? It was a multi-generational family assignment in which that covenant or that contract was signed between Abraham and the Lord. Okay, so when you look at wealth and a good man leaves an inheritance for his children, you got to look at it in that context, okay, of God giving you the ability to create wealth so that you can fulfill a multi-generational covenant or assignment from the Lord. Does that make sense? Okay. So, when we talk about multi-generational family, if the Lord really took 40 years for us to learn about family, we got to ask ourselves some very, very basic fundamental questions. And we need not have the answer, but we can always seek the Lord. And hopefully we receive some level of revelation. Is Lateran a family? Okay. If so, what does it take to be part of the family? At what point does a person not become part of the family? And what unites us as a family? Is it a common mission? A common belief? A common asset? Until we address this issue, till we seek the Lord and get some real revelation on this, I think it'll be difficult for us to figure out what to do as a family if we don't even know who is in the family. On a more practical note, I want to challenge some of you to ask the Lord, is the Lord going to use your house to be a multi-generational family in His plan and in His assignment? If so, as the patriarch and matriarch of your house, what do you need to do to establish your house for multiple generations? I've given you different examples from different families. I'm not asking you to adopt their rules, but I'm suggesting that unless you have some framework, some rules, your family will not survive more than 3 generations. Let us pray.